They say blood is thicker than water, but I've come to believe that debt is thicker than either. I'm 47, live in a small blue-collar neighborhood in Springfield, Missouri, and I finally paid off my house this past March. 10 years of scraping, saving, and patching drywall with more hope than money. I'm not rich. I'm an HVAC technician with calluses on my palms and receipts for every tool I own. But this place? This modest 3-bedroom with a sagging porch swing and a cracked driveway? It's mine. Every inch of it. Paid in full. So you can imagine how I felt when my sister, the globetrotter with a Pinterest board for a life plan, called to say they were coming back to the States. Broke. Homeless. And, surprise, needed a place to stay. Here's the kicker. I just found out she sold the house in Bozeman for adventure money. Took her husband and 2 kids on a trip around the world with no end date, no plan, just vibes. And now, after 2 years of Instagram sunsets and barefoot beach parenting, they want to crash here. Rent-free. At first, I offered what I could. Help finding a rental, pitching in for a deposit, even calling a favor from an old buddy who owns a duplex out by Battlefield Road. I thought that was generous. But apparently, if you're not offering up your home like some kind of Airbnb for family, you're cold. You're selfish. You're ungrateful. That's what she said. Ungrateful. Because according to her, I owe her for how we were raised. As if childhood trauma is some kind of coupon you can cash in for free housing. But what really spun me sideways, the twist, the thing that cracked open all the old rusted parts of me, was when I found out she'd already told the kids they were moving in. Told them they'd each get their own room. That Uncle Joe would make his famous pancakes every Sunday. I hadn't even said yes. She made the decision for me and just expected me to nod along like I always had. And I realized something in that moment. This wasn't about shelter. It was about control. About stepping back into the role she always played. The one who decides how things go. The golden daughter. The one mom called brave while I worked double shifts to keep the lights on in her house when dad got sick. I'm not a saint. I made my share of bad calls. I drink too much gas station coffee. I've ghosted good women because I didn't know how to explain my baggage, and I spent 5 years refusing to visit Dad's grave because I was still angry at how he left things. But this house, it's the only thing I built with both hands and a tired heart. It's mine. So when I said no, it wasn't with anger. It was with finality. A quiet, solid no. And just like that, I became the villain. I didn't think saying no would blow up like it did. Thought maybe there'd be a couple guilt-tripping phone calls, some teary Facebook posts I could ignore. What I didn't expect was a full-blown family intervention in my own driveway, like I was the one who'd fallen apart. It happened the following Sunday. I was out back staining the deck, something I'd been putting off for 3 years, and I saw them pulling up. Her minivan, my mom's old Buick, my brother-in-law's pickup, which he's never filled with anything useful. It was like a sad parade of entitlement. And out they came. My sister, in yoga pants and that scarf she always wears like she just came from protest. Her husband, looking like a man who's been apologizing for everything since 2008. The kids, who honestly I adore, but who looked more confused than anything else. And then, of course, my mother, lips pursed like she was walking into a courtroom. They didn't even knock. Just came around to the backyard like it was their house. My sister started in right away, saying they'd just come to talk, that they didn't understand why I was being so harsh. I looked down at the brush in my hand, watching the stain drip between the cracks in the wood, and thought about how long I'd been cleaning up other people's messes. Then came the speech. My mother called it a family solution, which is what she always says right before asking me to sacrifice something. I swear, that woman could package guilt in a mason jar and sell it at a farmer's market. They wanted one of the bedrooms. Just one. Temporary. A few months tops. Said they'd make themselves invisible. I'd barely noticed them. Her husband chimed in with some rehearsed line about community and family. And what would Dad want? Which was rich, considering Dad spent most of his life either disappointed or silent. Usually both. But here's the part that cut deep. When I said no again, calmly, like a grown man with boundaries, my mother's face hardened, and she said she was ashamed of the man I'd become. That was it. That was the moment. Not when they assumed they could live rent-free. Not when they showed up uninvited. But when my own mother weaponized shame like she always did when we were kids. Only this time, it didn't land the way she expected. Because I didn't feel ashamed. I felt free. The silence after that moment was almost biblical. My sister looked stunned, like she couldn't comprehend a version of me that didn't roll over the second mom frowned. Her husband shifted uncomfortably, hands deep in his cargo shorts, eyes on the ground. The kids, bless them, stayed glued to the patio bench, sensing the tension but too young to name it. And me? I just stood there, hands stained with varnish and memory, breathing in the weight of years I didn't know I was carrying. See, the house, my house, it's not just brick and beams. It's every bad decision I learned to undo. It's every night I ate instant noodles so I could afford a new water heater. It's patching the drywall in the guest room after my ex left, when I realized I'd made it through heartbreak and still came home to something solid. That front door is the only door I've ever closed and locked without wondering if I'd be welcome tomorrow. But of course, they didn't see any of that. To them, I was being cruel. That was the word my sister used when she finally spoke again, said she couldn't believe I'd turn away family when we were in crisis. I asked her, calmly, what kind of crisis starts with selling a paid-off home to fund 2 years of selfies in Morocco and ends with demanding free housing from your only responsible sibling? She didn't answer, just cried. And that's the worst part, because I didn't want her to cry. I wanted her to understand. But she never does. Not really, because she's never had to. She's always had someone to catch her fall. Dad, then me. Always someone folding her parachute. She doesn't know what the ground feels like. Mom, of course, took her side. She always does. She said maybe I wasn't the man she thought I'd be. That success had hardened me. I almost laughed. If she knew how many nights I sat in that living room, wondering if I'd made a mistake, wondering if being alone was the price for building something I could call mine, she wouldn't say I was hard. She'd say I was tired. There was a long pause. And then, finally, I said it. The sentence that made everything still. I told them they needed to leave. Now. And I said it like I meant it. They didn't move at first. My sister stood there, arms crossed, jaw tight. My mother looked at me like she didn't recognize the man in front of her. And her husband, he didn't even look up, just kept staring at his feet like they held the answers to a test he forgot to study for. So I walked past them, not to threaten, not to yell, just to open the gate. And I held it open. That's when she said it. My sister, voice trembling but full of that old, sharp edge she used to cut me down with in high school. She said maybe I'd build a house, but I'd never build a family. And that's why I die alone. Now, you'd think something like that would knock the wind out of me. But all it did was confirm what I already knew. She hadn't come for help. She'd come to win. And the thing about people who play every hardship like a trump card is they never know what to do when someone folds. I didn't say anything, just kept holding the gate open. She walked through first, muttering something under her breath. Her husband followed, still silent. The kids looked back. The younger one even waved. I waved back. I wanted them to know this wasn't their fault, that adults can make selfish choices and still love their children, just not always enough to protect them from their own mess. Mom was the last to leave. She stopped at the gate, looked at me, and said something she hadn't said since I was a boy, that she was disappointed, not angry, not hurt, disappointed. That word used to crush me. But this time I just nodded, because she wasn't wrong. I was disappointing her, and it was the best thing I'd done in years. I closed the gate, went back to staining the deck. That night, I didn't sleep much. Not from guilt, from something stranger, peace. The kind that feels almost suspicious at first, like your body's waiting for the aftershock that never comes. I sat on the couch, lights off, nursing a beer that went warm in my hand. The house was quiet, not just empty, quiet in a way that felt earned. Like it was finally mine in more than just name. Like it had chosen me back. But in that stillness, another feeling crept in. Not regret, just the slow, cold ache of truth. I was alone. No backup, no partner waiting in the other room. No shared history to roll over to. Just me. And while I wasn't ashamed of how I got here, I couldn't pretend it didn't hurt sometimes. The next day, the text started. Not from my sister. She was smart enough to go radio silent. But my cousin in St. Louis texted, saying he heard what happened and that family helps family. Then came a message from our aunt in Tulsa, something about keeping our hearts open, followed by a Bible verse she definitely copied from a Facebook graphic. Even my old neighbor, Ms. Lanning, bless her, emailed a long, guilt-soaked plea that ended with "You don't want to live with regret, Joe." What none of them realized was that I wasn't closing a door. I was locking a vault. I knew the pattern. I'd seen it before. One person holds a line, says no, sets a boundary, and suddenly they're the enemy. The ungrateful one, the cold-hearted one, and the real kicker? The people pointing fingers are the same ones who never lifted a hand when you were drowning. And that's when the twist came. I got a voicemail from my sister's husband. He apologized, said he should have stood up, should have spoken differently, should have never let it go that far. And then he said something that stopped me cold. He said my sister had already started applying to jobs back in Bozeman, that she'd known this was coming, the crash, the fall, and had quietly prepared for the possibility I'd say no. But she hadn't told anyone, because she was afraid that if she admitted failure out loud, it would make it real. That voicemail changed nothing about my decision, but it did remind me of something I'd forgotten. Even the ones who hurt us can carry their own shame. That voicemail echoed in my head for days. Not because it changed anything, it didn't, but because it cracked open a memory I hadn't touched in years. I was 14. Dad was still around, but barely. Half-empty cans of Busch Light lined the garage like trophies of surrender. Mom was working double shifts at the hospital and pretending everything was fine. And I remember one night, hearing my sister crying through the wall. Quiet, muffled sobs. The kind you make when you're trying not to be heard. I never went to check on her. Never knocked. I just lay there, listening, pretending I didn't hear a thing. I thought about that moment after the voicemail. How many times had I let her fall apart in silence? How many times had I been too busy surviving to notice someone else unraveling? I still didn't call her back, but I saved the voicemail. Not for any noble reason, just because some part of me needed to remember that we were all raised in the same storm. We just built different shelters to survive it. The following weekend, I got a knock at the door. Not a text, not a phone call, a literal knock, the kind that makes you pause mid-step because nobody does that anymore. It was my sister's oldest kid, Tyler, 13. Awkward in that way middle schoolers always are, limbs too long, voice not quite sure where to land. He held out a Ziploc bag with a dozen misshapen cookies and said, "Mom, made too many and thought I might want some." I stood there for a second, not knowing what to do with the moment. Then I took the cookies. They were burned around the edges. Too much vanilla, still warm, and somehow they tasted like truce. I didn't eat all the cookies, just one, maybe two. Left the rest on the counter next to my overdue electric bill and a screwdriver I still hadn't put away. Every time I walked past them, I caught that sweet burnt scent and felt conflicted. The thing about family is, even when you cut the rope, the knot still stays inside you. A few days later, I was working on a truck when Mom showed up. No warning, just appeared in the driveway like she was delivering judgment straight from heaven. I wiped my hands on a rag, half ready for another guilt trip, half curious if she brought food. She always brought food when she needed something. But this time, she didn't bring anything, just herself. She stood there, not stepping forward, eyes scanning the house like she was trying to remember what parts of it she'd helped build. The answer was none. She never lifted a hammer, never painted a wall, but she'd still managed to leave fingerprints all over the place. She said she wasn't there to argue, said she wanted to understand. And for the first time in a long time, I told her the truth. About the debt, the years of working weekends, the sacrifices nobody noticed. I told her how it felt to always be the backup plan, the reliable one, the one they forgot to ask if he was okay. She didn't interrupt, just listened, really listened. Then she asked something I didn't expect. She asked if I was happy. I didn't know how to answer. Not because I wasn't, but because I didn't know what happiness meant anymore. I'd spent so long building something stable, I forgot to ask if it made me feel alive. She nodded, like she understood more than I gave her credit for. Then, just before leaving, she touched the side of the truck and said the last thing I expected to hear. She said, "I'm proud of you." It didn't fix everything, but it cracked something open in me, something I hadn't let breathe in years. I stood in the driveway long after she left, hands still dirty, wondering what it meant to start healing. After that visit, things didn't magically fall into place, but they did settle, like silt in a riverbed after a long flood. Nobody begged to move in again. No one called me a villain. The family group chat stayed quiet, which was maybe the biggest miracle of all. But I started noticing little things. A gift card in my mailbox. No note, just a Walmart logo and $50. A voicemail from my aunt in Tulsa. Not the guilt-soaked kind, just a message asking how I was doing and whether I needed anything. Even Ms. Lanning, my neighbor, brought over a casserole she accidentally made too much of, though she winked when she handed it to me. None of these things made me forget the months. No, the years of being invisible. But they were a start, like tiny apologies without the words. Then came the letter. Real paper. Handwritten. Postmarked from Bozeman. It was from my sister. Not a long letter. Just 2 pages. But every word felt heavy. Not with blame, for once, but with something I hadn't heard from her since we were kids. Humility. She said she'd found work, part-time, but steady. Said the kids were adjusting. Said her husband had started picking up shifts at a mechanic shop and actually liked it, grease under his nails and all. She didn't mention Instagram. Didn't mention beaches or the journey. Just talked about normal things. Rent, groceries, homework. And then, toward the bottom of the second page, she wrote something that stopped me cold. She said she used to think I lived a small life, that staying in one place, building a home, fixing your own appliances, all of it felt like settling. But now, she understood that there's a quiet kind of bravery in staying, in showing up for your own life, even when no one's clapping. She said she was sorry. She didn't ask to move in, didn't ask for money, just said thank you for the boundary, for the truth, for being solid when she was spinning. I read it 3 times, then folded it and put it in the drawer next to my property deed and an old birthday card from Dad. It didn't fix everything, but for the first time in a long time, I felt like maybe we weren't enemies anymore. Just 2 people who survived the same storm and finally learned how to say it out loud. I didn't write her back. Not right away. Not because I didn't want to. I just didn't know how. What do you say to someone who finally sees you clearly after decades of squinting? So instead, I did something small. I mailed Tyler a pack of those gel pens he liked, the neon ones he'd used to draw dinosaurs on my fridge last summer. No note, just the pens. A quiet way of saying, I see you too. A week later, a photo came through on my phone. No caption, just a sheet of paper taped to a bedroom wall, covered in marker dinosaurs, and one sentence scrawled across the top. Uncle Joe is cool. It made me laugh. A real one, from the chest. Not the kind you fake when you're trying to smooth over tension. I hadn't realized how long it had been since I laughed like that. Since something pure and small actually got through the armor. After that, it got easier. I called my cousin in St. Louis, and we talked for an hour. About nothing, really. Football. Gas prices. He didn't bring up the family drama, and I didn't either. We just talked like brothers who'd forgotten they were allowed to. I even stopped by Mom's place. She wasn't expecting me. I think she thought I was just dropping something off, but I stayed. She made tea. We sat on the porch. No big speeches, just 2 people sharing silence that didn't feel like a punishment for once. And then something strange started happening. I found myself relaxing in my own house. Not pacing. Not waiting for the next shoe to drop. I'd wake up and drink coffee without checking my phone in dread. I started fixing up the guest room. Not for anyone in particular, just because I wanted to. A room deserves to be ready, even if no one's coming. I realized I'd spent years fortifying this place like a castle, thinking the walls were what kept me safe. But it wasn't the locks that gave me peace. It was the fact that, for the first time, the door was mine to open or close on my terms. I kept the letter in my nightstand. I'd open the drawer some nights just to touch it. Not to reread it, necessarily, but to remind myself it was real. That someone who once took everything for granted could step back and say, without flinching, you were right. But the truth is, I wasn't always right. I thought a lot about that over the following weeks. About how I held on to bitterness like it was cash in the bank, saved it, grew it, protected it. And I wondered how many times I could have reached out first. Could have forgiven without waiting for someone to earn it. Could have asked for help instead of wearing pride like armor. I don't regret saying no. Not for a second. But I do regret the years I spent thinking that being strong meant being alone. One afternoon, about a month after the letter, I found myself back at the hardware store. The same place I spent 10 years buying screws, paint, and all the pieces that built the life I live now. I was picking up a new light fixture for the hallway, something warm and soft, when I heard someone call my name. It was my sister. Alone. She looked different. Not worn down exactly, but quieter. Softer in the face. She smiled, not the forced kind, but a real one, like we were 2 old friends running into each other by accident instead of 2 siblings who'd gone to emotional war. She didn't bring up the house, or the past. Instead, she asked about the deck. Said she missed the smell of wood stain, even though it gave her a headache. Then we talked about Tyler's science project and how her youngest still eats only the red Skittles. It wasn't deep. It wasn't dramatic, but it was good. When we parted ways, she reached into her purse and handed me something. Said it was silly, so I didn't have to keep it. It was a keychain, a little silver hammer. Said home builder on it. I didn't say much, just nodded. But after she walked away, I held it in my hand for a long time. Long enough to know I'd never throw it out. The keychain sits on a hook by my back door now, right next to the one I hang my truck keys on. Most days, I don't even look at it. But sometimes, when I come in late from work or I'm locking up for the night, my eyes catch the shine of it. That tiny silver hammer. Home builder. It gets me every time. Not because I think it fixes anything. It doesn't. Not because we've turned into some perfect family sitcom where everything wraps up in 30 minutes with a hug and a laugh track. That's not real. What's real is this. We survived each other. And that, for a family like ours, is no small thing. My sister and I still don't talk all the time. We're not close in the way people write holiday letters about. But there's something softer between us now. A shared silence that isn't loaded with resentment. A kind of peace we built not by forgiving everything, but by acknowledging what happened and choosing not to repeat it. Last Sunday, she texted me a photo of the kids helping plant tomatoes in their new rental's backyard. Tyler was holding a tiny green sprout like it was made of glass. The caption said, "We're learning how to stay put." And I just sat there staring at the screen, not knowing whether to smile or cry. Because somehow, in our own crooked way, we were both learning to stay, to build roots in the dirt we used to run from. I'll never be the kind of man who wins awards or gets mentioned in wedding toasts. But I built something. I held the line when it would have been easier to fold. And I protected the one thing in this world that ever truly felt like mine. And if that makes me the villain in someone else's story, then so be it. Because in mine, in this quiet, hard-earned life I carved out right here in Springfield, I finally got to be the hero of my own.